profound pride in Washington that yet again has shown the powers of a state that has led the nation in so many ways, and last night again provided a light of inspiration for the state, for the whole United States. And the reason we have provided that inspiration is, again last night, Washingtonians hewed to our basic values. We are a special and unique state because we have a sense of strong values that we again defended last night. We have a strong commitment to the health of our children and to our environment, and we stand against pollution in our air and water. And last night, by overwhelming margins, Washingtonians again protected our precious environment. We have a strong commitment to our seniors and for those who may need help staying in their homes. And by an overwhelming margin, Washingtonians rejected the effort of those who would snatch away those benefits. And I'm pleased by that result. We are a state that values the education of our children and fairness in our tax system. And last night, Washingtonians, by strong margins, rejected the effort to pull back funding from our schools and preserve the capital gains tax. These are all three ways that we have again responded to the basic and most admirable characteristics of the state of Washington, and I could not be more proud of what Washingtonians did last night. They rejected the siren song of millionaires who attempted to subvert our basic values, and they did so in a real thumping. This was an avalanche. This was a tectonic plate movement. This was a tidal wave of votes against these initiatives. And that's important, and I'll tell you why. Over the next 4 years, the nation is going to be looking for advances in these value systems, particularly in climate change. And it can now look at Washington and have the message go forth from this time and place that it is a winning message to stand against climate change. And we have a mechanism of building an economy and clean energy jobs while simultaneously defeating climate change. And this is a message that's going to spread forth across the United States. This is why it was so important that we not lose this initiative, because otherwise it could have dampened enthusiasm for climate change action. And this is doubly important. This win is doubly important now that the White House is in control of a person who denies the existence of climate change, calls it a hoax, and says that wind turbines cause cancer. The message from Washington State now to all the other states that we can work together with is a very strong one, that we can win on climate change. And we should be encouraged, even though this is a dark moment on the federal basis, we should be encouraged that we now lead the U.S. Climate Alliance of 24 other states, all of whom are committed to work jointly against climate change. This represents 60% of the U.S. economy. And this win by huge margins, which was a real thumping, as I said, is going to help us spread that message to succeed. Second, I take particular pride in the fact that Washingtonians appeared for the first time since Franklin Roosevelt was president to have chosen all Democrats in our statewide elected official positions. This is an extraordinary statement of confidence in the direction of the state of Washington. To some degree, elections are referendums on the direction that your state is going. I think the fact that we now apparently have elected all Democrats to statewide positions is an affirmation that our state is heading in the right direction, according to large majorities of the state of Washington. I feel vindicated to some degree that the things we have accomplished during my 12 years in office have been affirmed by people of the state of Washington of this quite unique achievement. And I know these people, I trust them, they're all going to help. We know that there are likely to be challenges from the White House, as we experienced the first rodeo with Donald Trump. And I'm very confident that we have the best duo to defend Washington State that we could possibly have, which is Bob Ferguson as governor, Dick Brown as Attorney General. Bob Ferguson sued Donald Trump something like 95 times and won 93 times. We got a great team to defend the state of Washington. We also, fortunately, because I know that there are a lot of people who are worried about their personal futures and their families' futures in light of some of the notorious statements by Donald Trump, I know they're worried about that today. And I'm glad that our state has already adopted multiple measures to protect our state citizens. We have a shield law that prevents states from coming in and criminally prosecuting people for a woman's exercise of a right of choice. We've stockpiled mifepristone. We have a bill called My Health, My Data, which prevents somebody from getting into a woman's private health data and then criminally prosecuting them from other states. We've provided financial resources for our health clinics because we know that the demands on health clinics in our state will grow because people have had to flee their own states in criminal prosecution. We have a Keep Washington Working law that will prevent the abuse of law enforcement data by efforts by Donald Trump. And to me, it's still stunning to me that somebody's going to be in the White House to try to deport people from the University of Washington, students who are tremendous students becoming doctors and lawyers, but that's what we have in the White House at the moment. Thankfully, we've already taken measures to protect the dreamers. So we are well positioned to defend Washingtonians from the egregious conduct of this new president. We have the personnel in place, we have the statutes in place, and I'm confident we'll do as much as humanly possible to protect Washingtonians going forward. So if you now bear with me for a moment, because there was something else I wanted to share with you. And I think I may have wrapped up my comments, so I'm happy to stand for questions.
Governor, you just mentioned that all the Democrats that were elected last night, you obviously know what happened on a national level. Donald Trump has said he believes it's a mandate from the American people. How do you balance that all these Democrats were elected in Washington State, the rest of America looks at the way government is going a bit different?
Well, look at Washington's the best state in the union. It's the most beautiful state. It's the most caring for our youth. It's the most progressive when it comes to fairness. It has great long-term care programs. It is always striving for a fair tax system. We are a uniquely progressive state, and we have values that fit this unique corner of the world, and we're going to stand by them. And whatever happened in the presidential race, it's not going to turn us around. We're not going to be slowed down in our effort for justice of our people. We will not be dissuaded from our effort to fight climate change. That's not going to affect us at all. And by the way, I do want to make this point, and I think sometimes this is lost in people. For all his efforts to ignore climate change, for all his efforts to punish those that he doesn't agree with, we can still move forward as a state of Washington. He cannot stop us. He cannot stop us in our efforts against climate change. And the reason is because we have the authority under our Constitution as a legitimate state to move forward on climate change policies. So he may deny climate science, but he cannot deny the ability of Washington State to move forward by building clean energy jobs, which we're doing big time in the state of Washington. And by the way, I'm so thrilled. We've done two things. We've elected people who are going to fight climate change, but we're also putting people to work like crazy across the state of Washington. I got to tell you, one of the most joyous things I've been able to do as Washington's governor in the last 12 years is looking people go to work in these new industries, looking at the steel workers building the SELA plant and the Group 14 plant at Moses Lake, looking at the people building biofuels and crystal clear jet fuel over in Moses Lake, talking to the people I talked to last night at our celebration of a guy who has one of the preeminent fusion companies in the world today. 3 of the leading fusion companies in the entire world today are within 10 miles of the Space Needle. We are creating jobs like crazy, and I'm glad we're going to continue to do that.
But can't the federal government, can't he and potentially new Congress threaten to withhold federal money for transportation, for climate change, for other programs, unless this state falls in line?
No, not under the law. Not under the law. That would be illegal. And he might make some noises about that, but ultimately we do have 2 backstops against his nefarious conduct. One is our judicial system, the other is the Constitution, the third is we still have some voices in the U.S. Congress. So you can anticipate a lot of noise from him, but like the first term, we're going to have our difficulties with him, but ultimately we have prevailed in the most basic functions. We will continue to have health care financed, I believe, by the federal government. We will continue ultimately to have transportation funds as well. I do not believe he will be successful dragooning and destroying the transportation infrastructure of one half of the United States. That is not going to happen. He may try, but it ain't going to happen. Yes.
Governor, Joe Biden had an 8 million vote win in 2020, which has now turned into apparently a 5 million vote win for Trump. Are Democrats out of touch with the American people?
No, and I'm not going to pretend to do an analysis after 18 hours of this particular race. But look, things change. I've been around long enough to know that tide goes in, tide goes out. And that happens sometimes, and I would not reach any conclusions to the contrary at the moment. Yes, John?
Okay, I've got a multiple part question on the Climate Commitment Act and its victory from yesterday. When did you first conceive of going with the cap and trade program? What did you have any problems wrapping your head around the concept? What was your biggest difficulty in getting the Democratic caucuses in the legislature to go with it? And finally, when you were criticized for the pennies on a per gallon remark, did you say, oh crap, I wish I really didn't say that?
So I wrote a book, co-authored a book in 2007 talking about this concept. I helped lead an effort in the U.S. House of Representatives that passed a version of cap and vest from the U.S. House of Representatives back in 2010, as I recall. I introduced it in 2014 within, I think, the first year of becoming governor. I worked on it ever since. And it has been proven to be a very successful program at both restraining pollution and getting into the hands of Washingtonians the things they need so that they can reduce their carbon pollution and get more reasonably priced electricity and the like, which they're doing today. Look, this thing is working. I'll take you around state of Washington and show you where it's working. The woman in Toppenish who's got solar panels, whose utility bills almost zero. The woman in Vancouver who got a heat pump, whose utility bills now are almost zero. The companies in Moses Lake that are putting thousands of people to work in these new high-tech companies. 8 million kids have had 8 million free bus rides as a result of this already. We're getting people for utility credits of $200. We've had spectacular success in our effort to help lower-income people to get electric vehicles. So this thing is working big time. It has generated dollars that have gone right back to Washingtonians, and I don't regret anything. This has been a super successful program.
A few things I still want to revisit.
You got a quota, John. You got a quota, you know.
Some. I've got my own evil agenda that I'm following. What you had to sell this to the two Democratic caucuses, and it took you a few years to do that. What was your biggest problem in selling this to the Democratic caucuses? And again, going back to the pennies per gallon thing, did it cause you to chew your fingernails over it passing? Essentially, that was the biggest arrow that the other side threw at you. Do you regret saying that?
Look, obviously that was spectacularly unsuccessful. This wasn't just a fanny whooping, it was a tail kicking that it got. And that bunch of malarkey, which had nothing to do with the passage of this thing, I didn't say that till after it was already the law. So that was a bunch of malarkey to start with, and people saw through that. And they voted for a very spectacularly successful program by amazing margins. Look, when you were in by 62%, that's 50% higher than 40% or 38% they got. This was a tidal wave of opposition to their efforts. So obviously the people saw through that, and they thought that was just malarkey, as President Biden used to say. So you ask another question in there.
What was the hardest?
Well, the hardest
years.
Yeah, the hardest part.
Caucus.
The hardest part
What
is
was the hardest part of that.
The hardest part is that we had a Republican legislature the first several years as I was a governor, and it's very distressing to say, but we have one party that still believes climate change is a hoax. They refuse to lift a finger to help us. It's very disturbing. Someday I hope that both parties will be willing to present their ideas on how to fight climate change. But right now we only have one party that's doing that, and that's the Democratic Party. So the first several years I was governor, I had an immovable force, which is the Republican caucus, who refused. And this is very disappointing to me, because Republicans and Democrats are the people in Asheville, North Carolina, whose homes have been flooded by climate increased hurricanes. All over the world, people are suffering this, and these are both conservatives and liberals. So the fact that Republicans still have their head in the sand and their tail feathers in the air is very disappointing to me. I wish we had a bipartisan work on this. Then we had to wait for some individual changes in the legislature to get people who are more amenable to this idea, and as soon as we did, we passed it, and it's been working big time since then. And by the way, I want to mention something about this. I don't think this has got enough. Two things about this bill. Number one, fundamentally what this bill is about is reducing pollution. There's been a lot of discussion of the financial aspects of this. But the first thing it does is it reduces pollution. It has a binding limit on the amount of pollution that's causing an epidemic of asthma in our state. And number two, all the money that is generated by the polluters are the one paying for this. All of that money comes back to Washingtonians. It doesn't go to Texas, it doesn't go to Saudi Arabia. It comes right back to Washingtonians, and they're enjoying it. And it's such a gratifying to me to go around the state to see people's lives being improved by this.
Governor, what should Democrats learn from the national trend in this 2024 presidential race? And what parallels or lessons do you see from the 1994 midterm congressional election, which was a loss for Democrats?
I would say what I've learned is people should come live in Washington State, because it's a paradise of values. It values clean air and clean water, values our people who might have need, values the public education of our kids, and is willing to act on it. Come to Washington State. That's what I've learned. Yes?
I know that AG Bob Ferguson is pretty well known for fighting the Trump administration in court, but how do you see the role of a Democratic governor in a second Trump administration? What specifically should a Democratic governor do in this position?
Well, maintenance of some of the statutes I referred to that are protecting Washingtonians, to make sure that those maintain on the books, will be important. Supporting through your voice the Attorney General, if the Attorney General has to initiate legal action. And I suspect Nick Brown was busy when he was my lawyer, right? And he's going to maybe be busier as Attorney General. And I am confident that Governor Ferguson will stand by him in these efforts. So it's important to have that duo working together in concert to give moral and political support. I'm confident that that will take place. And by the way, I think people need to keep score here a little bit. I don't know if that's unimportant, but I think it's important. Bob Ferguson beat Donald Trump like 95 out of 97 times. Nobody has ever had a winning record like that except maybe Perry Mason. And so this is a fantastic record of success protecting Washingtonians from his depredations. And I see no reason why that cannot continue. And we still have a judicial system that is largely intact, and we intend to make sure that it does its job protecting Washingtonians.
Governor, coming into your final months in office, particularly with the Trump presidency incoming, what steps do you want to take while you are still governor to shore up protections for undocumented people, the LGBTQ community, reproductive health care? What steps do you want to take, or do you think that the state should take?
Well, I've taken those steps already, which is to get people elected who are going to protect those things that we've already done. And I'm proud that we've achieved this. I supported all of the Democratic candidates that won every single statewide race. I've been the person who has signed 5 of the laws that I just made reference to. Those are on the books, and they will remain on the books as long as I'm governor, and I believe after I'm governor as well. So we've already taken that cocoon of protection around Washington State, and that has not been removed. And because these are a matter of state law, it's going to be very difficult for Donald Trump to pierce those. He hasn't been able to. Those have been on the books now for several years while he was president, and he was unsuccessful in trying to penetrate those protections of Washingtonians. So I'm confident that those measures will continue.
You mentioned that people should move to Washington State because it's an oasis. Could you see an increase in population or people coming for our healthcare services further causing an uptick in the cost of living and housing crisis that's affecting a ton of young voters in the state, many of whom said the cost of living is their main issue in the election?
Yeah, I don't foresee some, huge influx of people that are going to have that kind of impact. We do have an influx of people that have been an issue in housing, but they're coming for the economic benefits, the jobs we have created. We've had about 1 million people moving to Washington since I've been governor. That's because we've had such an amazing economy, doing such amazing things. And I take pride in that we've been able to do that. We're a net importer of talent into the state of Washington, and I expect that will continue. That's why I've been so committed to building more housing. Look, we need more housing. And I'm proud that we've got over $1 billion of new investment in the last few years, working with the legislature that I procured. But there's going to need to be more investment even on top of that. Together with changing some of our zoning laws, we made some progress on that, but we need more. So those efforts will need to continue. But I don't think this issue is going to change in dramatic fashion in population.
Yes.
Yes.
I have a question on Initiative 2066. We know votes are still being tallied, counted, but it seems the vote is leaning to yes, voters want to ensure their access to natural gas. Can you comment on that?
Well, we just will remain to see where the votes are. We don't know where the votes are yet. It sounds like it could be very close. There is concern about that initiative. It's very important to preserve the initiative process, to respect the initiative process. And questions have been raised whether this was a defective initiative that really was not fair to voters because it did not adequately describe what it really was. And I think there is a very good chance that the court will find that it was defective by violating the single subject rule and therefore will not be actually go into effect. But we'll see. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Nope.
Governor, do you think the Democratic Party will become the supermajority in both House and the Senate in the state legislation? And do you think it's good for the Washingtonians?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it's likely the Democrats will pick up seats in the legislature. I don't know at the moment the number. We'll just have to count the votes.
I wanted to ask, heading into this moment of transition, how closely do you expect to work with Bob Ferguson on the transition period, especially since, coming into the legislative session, you're going to propose a budget, but he'll be the incoming governor proposing a budget. So can you talk a little bit about what you expect that dynamic to look like?
Well, I think he's going to have to call the State Patrol to drag me out of my office because I've enjoyed it so much. No, we work closely together. I'll share anything I can about what I think insights I have. But I will be proposing a budget which hopefully will give him and legislators an idea moving forward. So I have a legal responsibility to propose a budget that is within existing revenues. So I will be proposing a budget, and it's going to be difficult, frankly, because there are some challenges of our ability to actually fulfill the things we need to do with the existing revenue structure. But I will propose a budget, and I'll talk to him anytime he wants to talk to. But he's his own man. He's an independent. He's a strong-willed, incredibly smart guy, and I'm very confident he's going to do a good job.
Governor, is there anything in that budget, particularly a plan that you can share with us that will be passed from you to elect Ferguson?
No, I mean, if I knew, I might share it with you, but there's nothing at the moment that we've decided on. We've had to wait to really get down to the nubbins on this until we find out about these initiatives. There will already be a big hole in the Washington State budget already, and had there been bigger holes of billions of dollars from the loss of capital gains or the climate change, that would have even been a bigger hole. So now that we know those holes aren't going to be there, we'll get down to writing a budget.
Governor, you saw it in 2016. You're seeing it overnight. You were late in the room last night talking with people. There are Democrats that are freaked out in this state. What are you telling your colleagues? What are you telling fellow Democrats on whether they should be freaked out at what happened on a national level?
Well, people are extremely concerned. I was talking to some of our staff this morning, and there were some tears there because people do fear for themselves and their families. They've heard what Trump has said he would do. They've heard how he refers to some people, and they are sincerely concerned for their family's health and safety, and I understand that. What I say is what we're doing today is to say we have erected substantial protections for them. And ultimately, I'll say to John Paul Jones, don't give up the ship. We have a lot of efforts ahead of us. We've got ways that we know we can beat this guy, and we don't want to have his sociopathic tendencies get into the state of Washington. And you have a firm team around you that have now been elected en masse across the board in an unprecedented statement that Washington State is going to hew to the things we believe in. And I'm really proud of that. Yes?
What are your plans professionally or otherwise after leaving office?
I will presumably be working on efforts that will advance defeating climate change and building a clean energy economy, and I don't know what that may be, but I intend to be very, very active. Anything else? Thanks very much. Good luck. Don't forget to vote next time.
Not too much putting attention.
Yeah, no, you did a great job until that.